This week's episode is part one of a two-part series on two pivotal methods I have used to find clarity in my life. For this week, I'll discuss the first method, dynamic meditations. This practice, developed by Osho, is an hour-long active meditation, which is split into 5 stages. They don't have official names, but to quickly summarize them with a name, Stage 1, I call chaotic breathing. Stage 2, I call catharsis or explosion. Stage 3, I call the H mantra. Stage 4 is freeze. And stage 5 is celebration. Stick with me through this episode and you'll learn what all these silly names mean. So this practice is designed to enable one to bring up and release emotions. I have found it to be particularly effective in bringing up and letting go of deep, old, repressed emotions, particularly for me, anger. Through that release, I have, without trying at all, without even realizing that this would be on the other side of this practice, I found profound clarity, which has guided me to make decisions that have changed my life for the better. One of those decisions being to study Chinese medicine. This episode is for anyone who's feeling stuck and ready to move forward, but isn't quite sure how to do it. This practice, plus the one I'll discuss for the next episode, they're not easy. They require commitment and dedication, but my goodness, do they feel so good. Every time I do one, usually I don't want to do it, but I never regret when I finish. So at the end of the episode, I say that we'll talk about it next week, but next week is an interview. So you're going to have to wait 2 weeks from now to hear part 2, which is all about a practice called Falun Dafa or Falun Gong, which is a series of Qigong exercises, which has also just been magical and pivotal for me in my life. If you would like to work with me, you can find all of my information in the show notes. And if you're in South Florida and this practice, you want to do it, you're in, and you would like to practice it with somebody, reach out to me. I would really love to organize a small group of people because I would love to experience what it's like to do it with people. I can only imagine it's very powerful. So you can find my email, my Instagram, reach out to me on either. Instagram will probably be quicker. And yeah, let's get something organized. Welcome to the School of Whispers podcast. This is your host, Stephanie. I'm a licensed acupuncture physician and herbalist with a background in psychology, health sciences, and exercise physiology. Within my own spiritual awakening, I found myself learning pivotal lessons when I got myself to be in silence. Within that silence, the whispers came through. This is my sacred space of vulnerable storytelling where my guests and I share about the magic that comes from a life of following these whispers. I'm grateful you made it here, and I hope this show inspires you to live a life of following your own whispers. Let's get into the show. All right, welcome back to the show. I am back home from a week-long vacation in Costa Rica. I'm wondering if you can hear the rain and the thunder here right now, back in Florida as I record. I love, there's nothing like a summer storm. But yeah, that vacation was exactly what I needed. One day I'll let you guys in a little bit more on just all the challenges of life these days when I'm ready. But getting a break from that was so valuable for me in so many ways. And if you know me, if you've ever met me, then you've probably heard me talk about how Costa Rica is my favorite place in the whole entire world. When I think I was 6 or 7 the first time I went. And then from that point, there was just something in me that knew that I was my whole fullest self there, and that I would do whatever it took to, one, get there again and again. This was my 7th time since I was 7 years old going there. And I know that I'm also going to move there one day. And actually, that is something I did want to share at some point before I get into the topic. It's interesting hearing my family's reaction when I tell them, when I live here, this and that and that. Oh, I'm so excited to live here one day, because I think one, they can't imagine why someone would want to live in a third world country. Because, I mean, if you've ever been to West Palm Beach, we've got it all and more. The gourmand's food, the attractions, the shopping, the beaches, the lifestyle, it's all here. And actually, when I did move to New Zealand, the tiny little Invercargill at the bottom of the country, I had a huge, massive appreciation for the lifestyle of West Palm Beach. But it's always been me, it's always felt like I'm just biding my time here and preparing myself to get to Costa. And there's a lot of reasons why I'm not there yet. But yeah, my family, when they would hear me say that, I think I had one family member who was like, awesome, you go, girl. The rest of them just kind of looked at me funny, questioned me, are you sure? I think they believe I'm not going to make it there, or I will make it there and change my mind. And I am very open to the possibility of me getting there and changing my mind. I think that we are called to certain places in the world for a reason, and that reason can be fulfilled just by doing the action, packing up or selling all your shit and getting there and trying to start a life there. I might do that and all of a sudden realize, okay, this isn't for me, or I might stay there for the rest of my life, or I might be there for a couple of years and have a new dream of living somewhere else, decide somewhere else is calling my heart there. And I think that the most important thing is that I call my heart. One of the books that changed my life was The Alchemist, and one of my favorite quotes was the main character asking the Magi, the king, that mystical figure in the beginning, why should I listen to my heart? And the king says to him, you'll never again be able to keep it quiet. Even if you pretend to have heard what it tells you, it will always be there inside you, repeating to you what you're thinking about life and about the world. And so that's me there. And I felt like old Stephanie would have been really upset and triggered by their just lack of excitement for support or whatever I felt that I was missing there, and maybe would have questioned myself or wavered or fought with them. And I felt really like, that's okay. They don't know. They don't understand. And I will follow my heart regardless. So that's my little pearl here for you within that darkness brewing of doubt or whatever conflict, whatever it was, and those little tiny moments of, that's okay if your family doesn't get it. You just got to follow your heart, because it'll never shut up. It'll always be beating inside of your chest, telling you what it thinks about the world and what it wants from you and from this life here. All right, so let's get on to clarity. My friend Bonnie, who I talk about often on the show, she's a breathwork practitioner, and she often says within her sessions, you have to clear to become clear. You have to clear the way. And she always says, let your breath be like a broom. So I always get that visual of these practices that I'm going to tell you about, of sweeping away, clearing the way, wiping the mirror, wiping the table, so that I can be clear about what I'm being guided towards, what am I needing the most. And when I have done these practices, that's usually how I'll set my intention for the most part. Unless there's something really tough at hand that I really need to give time to, whether it's an event or an emotion, a memory. For the most part, at any point, I do have the big intention of let me step aside so that the truth, or so that source, whatever it may be, can come through. And that's why I think these practices are worth sharing with you, because they have brought me to places. They have dropped in ideas and helped me find clarity in what I want to do in my life. And I have just this world that I have built around myself. It blows my freaking mind. And 10 years ago, I had no idea that I was going to end up here. I mean, it was through the practice of the dynamic meditation that I decided to choose Chinese medicine. It was not even on my radar. It wasn't until I decided I'm going to do this for 5 weeks, 5 business days, 25 business days. So I took breaks on the weekends, but it was at the end of doing this practice, I cleared out so many tough emotions, and I'll get more into it soon. But that I was like, oh, I'm studying Chinese medicine. And it was through the practice of Falun Dafa that I gained the courage and let go of the fear to start my podcast. It was now, oh my gosh, from my recent experiences with dynamics, the dynamic meditations and Falun Dafa, I'm writing a book right now, and I wrote out a whole retreat based on the practice of clearing to become clear, which that's in the works right now, the retreat. I have the whole schedule mapped out. Now I just gotta get the yang side of it and start to make little things happen. But let me just say tentatively March 2025. So let's dive into my first piece of this topic of my practice of finding clarity, which is the dynamic meditation by Osho. So Osho's a bit of a controversial figure. I'm not going to talk about him much, but basically he was a guru from India who lived from like 1931 till 1990. And he was all about liberation, definitely really into sexual liberation, definitely kind of a creep, just by what I've read, but I'm not going to get into it because his personal character doesn't matter that much to me. He has left this world some really beautiful active meditations, and I'm grateful for it. Like, I'm here for these practices, and I barely know jack shit about him, and we're gonna just leave it. We're gonna leave it that way. It's like separating the art from the artist here. So active meditations are epic, and he didn't create the active meditation, but what he did was he organized these active. So an active meditation is rather than your stillness, silent meditation, you're active within it. Sure, I didn't even have to explain that to you. But what he did is, and what his foundation has done, is provided resources for these different types of active meditations with different phases. And the one that I've done the most, and it's been a godsend for me, is the dynamic meditation. I will link the website for it within the show notes, and I'll also link the playlist. This meditation has 5 stages, and it has a playlist to match up to each of the phases. And like I said, I'll link it in the show notes. I use the one that's on Spotify. So this meditation is meant to do in the early morning because it's a very yang. It's meant to exhaust you to pieces. And what it's done for me is it's helped me process deep, repressed sensations, emotions, memories. I'll tell you about in a moment about my husband's experience that he gave me permission to share. But this meditation, it brings it up to come on out, because what comes up must come out eventually. And I have really enjoyed the process of letting it come out right in like a big burst, rather than having it come out in little bursts throughout the day. Like, for example, for me, it was anger. Anger was the big thing. I thought that when I was going to start these meditations, I was just going to cry a lot. I started doing it in 2020, and I just thought I was going to have a lot of tears because I wasn't a big crier, and that I was on the journey of realizing, okay, crying's actually good for me, and I'm real pent up. But it was anger, and I was so unconscious of it. But how that anger would come out in slow trickles is I would have road rage, or I would have talked to somebody on the phone who was I didn't have a lot of boundaries, and that's why I was very angry. But I would also talk to someone on the phone, and they would overstep my boundaries, and I didn't know how to speak up for myself. And then I would hang up the phone, and I would just be like, fuck, in the car, and it would freak out Mana. And I would just have these big explosive moments. Or I would feel so easily like I would feel injustice, and it's so unfair, and I would snap really quickly. So before I get too far into my personal experience with the dynamic meditations, I'm going to talk out each stage with you, each phase. So the first stage is the chaotic breathing stage. It's 10 minutes long. Second stage is the cathartic stage, the explosion stage, where you act out what comes up, and that's 10 minutes. And then the third stage is the phase, where you jump up and down to exhaust yourself and go with your arms overhead. And then I'm shocked. I am in shock that this is a 15-minute long stage. But yeah, stage number 4 is 15 minutes long. I just had no idea. And I've looked at this website so many times. This stage, you are in complete frozen silence with your arms overhead for 15 minutes. I'm going to try not to remember that, which it's going to be unforgettable. But, you know, when you're in it, like, I do not want to be counting the minutes by. But then there's the last stage, which is celebrate. And they play music, and you dance and express knowing that you gave that moment to yourself. Okay, so to break down each phase a little bit more. So stage 1 is the chaotic breathing. So you breathe in and out through your nose, and there's no rhythm to it. So it's kind of sounds like this. And sometimes I'll do it in through my out through my mouth too. Sometimes I'll be a little stuffy. I probably sounded very stuffy because I just did some hape to ground before. So I got some Amazonian herbal boogies. Anyways, so this phase is, I would say, it's the most challenging because it is the beginning, and they're playing this music that's like, and you have to really just like throw yourself into it. I've only ever done this alone, by the way. I've never done it with other people. It's meant to be an individual practice, but from what I've like looked on YouTube and what I can only imagine, it's got to be really powerful to do it with others. I see that people will do it with eye masks sometimes. By the way, if anyone wants to do this with me and has a place where a big group of us can be, we could actually do it at my house. If you're in West Palm Beach and you want to do this with me, reach out. I would love to organize something because I just want to share this practice with the world. I think everyone deserves to feel a dynamic meditation. So if you've ever done Bhastrika, breath of fire, which is a Kundalini breath, the emphasis is on the exhale, pushing that air out. Because what will happen is the pleural pressure of your lungs, our lungs have these mechanisms to make sure that we constantly maintain a certain pressure within our lungs and our lung sacs. So when you exhale that out, that pleural pressure is going to automatically have you inhale and suck in that air. So it's like take care of the exhalation and the inhalation will come. You should also breathe deeply into your lungs while doing this. If you do it shallow, you're going to get dizzy. And you are going to get dizzy within this. And you're going to want to sometimes blow your nose. That's what I do. Sometimes I realize I have to pee because with that sharp exhalation, I'm really pushing my diaphragm as well as using my abdomen. And I'm like, usually it's first thing in the morning. I'm like, oh, I got to go. So that happens within the phase too. And I noticed that very quickly, and now knowing what I know, what it's doing is it's putting your body into an acidic fight or flight state. It is bringing shit up. And so sometimes panic comes up and you have to just remind yourself, I'm safe. I'm doing this for a reason. Okay, body, let's go. And also, you're going to feel little drips or big drips, big waves of big emotions start to come up. If you've ever done a breathwork class before, you know exactly what I mean. The difference here though is that within a breathwork session, you're encouraged to let it out right then and there, whereas within this first stage, of course, things are going to come out, but it's really important that for the full 10 minutes that you really focus on the breath. So if sometimes I'll have like little sobs come out, I return to the breath because I know that in the second stage, I'll have time to really let loose. Something else that's encouraged in this stage is to shake your body and just bring up any movement that's going to help you build and bring up that energy. So I'll twerk sometimes. I'll shake my hands a lot, shaking my hands and kind of just like shaking out my arms. Really, really helps move that stuff up. I'll pat my chest. I'll pat my belly. I'll do it all. Whatever, there's not really a rhyme or reason, a right or wrong way to do this here. Whatever really comes to your heart and your body's like, we're going to do this right now. Do it. You got to do it. So that's stage 1. So then we got stage 2, which is explosion. So it's the stage where you act out everything that's come up. So you get mad, you scream, you shout, you cry, you kick, you jump, you shake, you dance, you sing, laugh, throw yourself around, and don't hold back. As I mentioned earlier, I thought I was just going to cry the whole time. But no, I was angry. I was angry at myself, at my family, at my friends, at the whole entire world. And it was really interesting because, and I probably told this story on the podcast before, I think it was right before I had decided to do the dynamic meditations. I was in the shower and I was thinking about something that made me angry and I sucked it back in. I felt this big weight being pushed down on it in my body and I felt fear. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. What was that? And I felt into it and I listened for a little bit. And again, this was back in 2020. And I realized, oh my God, I'm afraid of anger because one, I grew up around a lot of anger and it really upset me yelling. I used to work with kids and I would make it my priority to never yell. And I worked this summer camp and I think I yelled once and the kids knew like, oh shit, we've done it this time. If Stephanie is yelling, we're in deep trouble. So, I also, with my Catholic background and watching scary movies, I really believed that if I expressed my anger, then I was sending a message out to Satan and all his demon cronies that I'm going dark, and that this was an invitation for them to come up and possess me. I would have nightmares about being possessed often. And, knowing what I know now, and I did not know this back in 2020, but the demon was me. I was my own demon, and my demon deserved to be expressed and to be seen. And the more I repressed it, the more it oppressed me in my life, the more it possessed everything in my life. So yeah, I don't know how after that realization, maybe it was within my practice of dynamics that I had that awareness. I can't really remember. It's been a couple of years. But to give you a picture and a couple of ideas of how I would express it, there were a lot of fucks thrown around. There was a lot of just naming all the things that had happened, that others had done to me, that I held against them and that I allowed to happen. Ooh, and then usually what happens is I'll be screaming things like, I deserve better. I deserve to be loved. I just want to be loved, or be kind to me, things like that. Or you've betrayed me, you let me down. And I realize I'm not really talking to the person who did the thing. Usually I'm talking to myself. I've let myself down. I've broken my own heart, and I have forgotten to love myself, as we all have, so many times in my life. And usually it takes a little bit of time for it to click again, because I'm just like in it. And then as I'm saying these words out loud, I realize where I've forgotten to show up for myself. It's really beautiful to experience that. Let's see, what else do I get into in this phase? I would throw pillows, punch couches. Sometimes I would hurt myself, which was a bummer. And I didn't do it intentionally or out of spite. It was more that I was kicking a wall and hurt my toe, or throwing a punch at a pillow and missing the punch and landing it on the floor, things like that. But it's still a bummer, because I think that ideally we can do this practice without hurting ourselves or damaging something. I'm going to admit, the last time I did a dynamic, as effective as it was, I threw, I think, my shoe at the wall, and there is a mark. I gotta find something that's gonna rub it off, because I tried with water and it's not going away. So what I'd like to do is I'll get a book in front of me, an old book that I don't care for, and I'll just destroy it, and I'll rip the pages. Destroying something, it feels so good. And actually, if you're going to do this alone, if you are blessed with the space to be able to do this alone, because it's loud and it's expressive. But when I lived in an apartment, it just wasn't the same. I couldn't do it for years, and thankfully now I'm in a house, so we back on. But yeah, I tried, and I just knew that with the jumping and the yelling, that I was just going to be disturbing too many people. I love getting a long hand towel and dipping it a little bit in water so it has a real good whip to it, and just like whipping walls, whipping the floor, whipping whatever I could find. It felt really good to be able to do that. So I would also just, break down on my knees. And then it wasn't every single time, because like I said, the first time I did the dynamic, it was 4 years ago. So I've done it quite a few times. And in that first realization of, oh my God, there's something in this. And I did it for those 5 weeks straight. I some days did just cry on the floor. Sometimes I was completely silent, and I just held myself, and I just touched my skin. because I have a history of picking at my skin. It's a coping mechanism I picked up when I was probably, I think, 5 or 6 years old. And it's gotten a lot better over the years. And it's interesting because the things that have helped it get better have been these roundabout, rather than focusing on the I am not going to pick mindset and figuring out behaviors and tools and mechanisms to help me stop picking. It was actually those things where I was just processing, letting go more and more, that I probably pick a fraction of what I used to do. So yeah, I would just touch my skin gently and just feel it. There was one time, remember, I just started laughing, and there was nothing funny going on in my head, but I was just laughing. Sometimes I'll shake. The list, it goes on and on. One thing I really like is that they say on Osho's website, the last 3 sentences, it says, never allow your mind to interfere with what is happening. There were times where I would question, why am I so upset about this? I'm making a big deal out of nothing. Nope. Or, wow, that sound that came out of me. Gosh, if someone was here to hear it, they would have been like, why is she squawking like a bird? What's wrong? Nope. Don't allow your thinking monkey mind to get in. Be in the very pits of your madness. That's the last 2 sentences I love. Consciously go mad. Be total. Because that crazy motherfucker that's inside of you has been trying to come out of you for years. And if you're hearing the way that I spoke about how I expressed my anger, and you're like, oh shit, yeah. That piece of you has got to come out sooner or later, or else you're going to be blocked in so many ways that it's like you don't realize how blocked you were until you're on the other side of it. Before I do move on to the 3rd stage, I do want to mention my husband's experience in this 2nd stage, because it was pretty epic. I've actually never had this happen to me, but he had a complete flashback into childhood. It was the first time he ever did this dynamic. I think I could count on one hand how many that he's done. I think he's done maybe like 2, maybe 3 with me. And it was wildly effective for him. He had a flashback. He went back to childhood and in my what I saw on my end, he was just on the floor with his in a child's pose with his hands around his head. But what was happening internally is he went back to a childhood home where he spent a lot of time alone, and he went up to that 8-year-old version of him and he just hugged him, and I heard him crying like, who was there for you? There was nobody there for you. And it was so beautiful to hear afterwards what he was going through, and it's helped him have so much insight into just, little quirks and mindsets that he's found himself in. So the 3rd stage is the phase. And in case you're wondering, how do you know when the time's up because you're in it? Again, the music on the playlist will change. So in this phase, you have your arms over your head and you jump up and down and shout, huh, 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 as deeply as possible. They say to have that huh. Well, I remember reading, it doesn't say here, but I remember hearing or reading once that you should really have it come from, again, like that diaphragm, the solar plexus. And then you jump up and down, you land flat on your feet, and you let that sound reverberate down to your root, your sacrum, your sex center. And I can attest, like it feels like, as you say huh, and you land on your feet in a certain way. If you want, maybe try it even right now. You land like directly on ball and heel of your foot. You feel from the base of your spine and from your reproductive organs like this reverberation. And you have to give it your all in this phase. I thought that it was like a huh, huh, when I first started doing it. And then I found a YouTube video and this guy was going hard. He was yelling, ha, 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 ha. Like he was, I just disturbed my kitty. Sorry, puppy. Go back sleepies. Go back to sleepies, Papa. Good. It was like he was jump roping and screaming ha 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 the whole time. And so I go as fast as I can go within those 10 minutes so that I can exhaust myself. And that being said, I'm not a marathon runner. I barely even do cardio. I go on long walks. And sometimes I'll do HIIT every other month or so. So I'm not an athlete within this. I do slow down and I'm panting and I'm trying to catch my breath. And yeah, so something that I think that's interesting too on the website, they call it a mantra. The H is a mantra. For what? I don't know. It doesn't say either, but that's okay. So the fourth stage, you hear someone on the playlist yell, "Stop!" And you freeze wherever you are in whatever position. So this I didn't know. I thought you had to keep your arms overhead. And here it says, don't arrange the body in any way. A cough, a movement, anything will dissipate the energy flow and the effort will be lost. Be a witness to everything that is happening to you. So I thought that I would have to keep my arms, because usually by the end of the H phase, my arms are like, my hands are by my ears. And so I thought I would have to keep my arms overhead the whole time, but turns out, I guess not. It sounds like the most important thing is that you are completely still. And so I usually keep my eyes closed within this phase to really marinate in the stillness. The 15-minute long stillness is just crazy to me. Or sometimes I'll try to make sure, as I feel like I'm getting towards the end of the H phase, I'll try to make sure I'm facing a window, because it's, from my Chinese medicine standpoint, after allowing so much energy, so much qi to build up and explode, the color green is really wonderful for the general of qi, which is the liver. And so the liver is the one that tells the qi to go here, there, everywhere, or stop, go. And so when you are looking at the color green outside a window, it feeds and soothes the liver. And usually this is where I feel so much clarity just erupt inside my brain. Sometimes it's just nothing. Sometimes I hear nothing. Sometimes I'm not even done with the hard emotion that began in stage 2. Began in stage 1. And I'm still stuck, quote unquote, stuck there. And I say quote unquote because now I'm realizing, no, I'm not stuck. There's just still more to feel and to process. But eventually, within those 15 long minutes, I gained so much insight, so many whispers on situations where I felt like I was at a complete dead end. Or on my most recent one that I did, not last week while I was in Costa, but right before I left for Costa, I had this whole idea for a book, like 3 books. It's going to be a fantasy novel with like prophecies and it's like spiritual awakenings and a plant medicine ceremony. It's in dragons and princesses and all of that. It was actually based on a short story that I had written back in 2018 that slips onto my mind every once in a while, and it just all came in hot. It was so, looking back at just the kind of like the divine timing and almost intervention of it for me, it's really, really special to look at. I have, I think, part 1 ready to go. I have 30 pages down. But I think with these kind of things, you're never really done until you're done. Like, part 1 might be 30 pages. It might end up being 50 to 100. I don't know. But I want the world to see these books one day. So that's a whole other piece in the work that I know that dynamic meditation's going to be a part of it for me. All right, and then the 5th and final stage is a celebration, as I mentioned. So they play this really, it's this music that's great because it goes between being really sweet and light, and I'll find myself doing a jig and giggling and dancing like a little girl, and then they'll have this really sensual, like almost like belly dancer music playing, and and then my body just gyrates according to that, and there's not really much to that. It's a celebration. Actually, what I do want to say is that there were times within that celebration phase where I felt heavy and sad, and like there was so much more to do around that thing, or maybe just almost like a hangover that kind of carried me through. And it wasn't every time. For the most part, most times there was like a relief or a joy to it, a lightness to it. But there were days where I felt really heavy. So if you are trying this and you feel that way, that's totally normal, I think. It's okay. For my situation, I was doing it daily. And so I knew that the next morning I would learn. I would learn what was that so tough for me? Why had I yet to let that go, and so on and so forth. And the last thing they say for the final stage is to carry your aliveness with you throughout the day, which I love. The last thing I want to mention that is on the website says that it takes time. At least 3 weeks are needed to get the feel of it, and 3 months to move into a different world. And that too is not fixed. It differs from individual to individual. If your intensity is very great, it can even happen in 3 days. So just keep that in mind. So I went way over my time that I gave myself for dynamic meditation. I clearly had a lot to say about it. I didn't think that I would have a lot to say. The plan was to combine this podcast of clarity into talking about this practice as well as Falun Dafa, but Falun Dafa has so much to it as well that I want to give proper time to it. So this is going to be the end of part 1 of the Whispers of Clarity. Practices for clarity, whatever I'm going to end up naming it. This is also going to be, when I eventually do have my retreat, one of the practices that we will do every other morning. And then the rest of the day is kind of recuperating and processing what came up within it. But I also don't really want to wait till a retreat in 2025 to do this. I really am looking for maybe a group of people where we can practice this together. They recommend sometimes using eye masks. If that's the case, then I would be someone to make sure that people don't hurt themselves. But yeah, if you know a space, maybe a public space where you can get loud, multiple people can get really loud. If you have a public space that maybe like it's a studio or something in West Palm Beach, maybe it's in Orlando, and no, ideally it'd be near me because I would want to do this with others at least once a month. I guess I could do it at my place, but like I got a husband and a roommate and cats. It freaks my cats out when I do this. So looking for somewhere outside of my home to do this. Well, okie dokie. That's it for now, my friend. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you would like to support the show, if anything I have ever said has resonated or helped you out, please, please, please leave me a 5-star review. Maybe write a review on Apple Podcast. Subscribe, make sure you share with a friend. Actually, if you listen to me on Spotify, if I could please ask you to leave me a rating on Spotify, ideally 5 stars, because I've had 32 ratings for the past year, and I would love to boost that a little bit more to get this podcast a little bit more off the ground and out there to the world. So that's my request of a gift from you. If you'd like to work with me, you can find my contact information in the show notes. If you're in Palm Beach County and would like to get acupuncture from me, you can also find the website as well as the phone number to the clinic that I work at. You can also reach out to me about the possibility of me coming to your home for a treatment. And actually, this feels like an opportunity to say, with all that being said, other than my acupuncture clinic, which does a vetting process for me, with all of my treatments through my business, the School of Whispers, I like to do a discovery call beforehand, because with readings, I like to gain clarity on what somebody's looking for, what their expectations are, maybe manage some unrealistic expectations. And when it comes to esoteric work, it takes, like the acupuncture, it takes a lot of preparation on both sides to make sure that the goal for doing this work is met. And also, when I go to people's homes, I've ended up in some pretty sketchy situations. So a lot of it is for the sake of clarity, the sake and beauty of clarity, but also for my safety. Okay, that is all from me for this week. A little short potty for you. Potty. Part 2 will be coming at you next week.